Greetings, everyone. I'm just going to jump into this one. Rain Drop 360. You asked me to talk about the process of sponsoring your spouse. I'm assuming Jamaica, but maybe it's from elsewhere. It doesn't really matter. The rules might be a little different, but they're very similar, whether it be the States or UK or Canada. I live in Canada, so I'm going to talk about my experience here in Canada and my knowledge of how this works. You've already met someone or already married, but you're in the process of sponsoring someone or thinking of going through this sponsorship. It's exciting. This is the opportunity for you to get together with the love of your life, if you can call it that, and start a new life with someone else. And many people these days are not waiting, are not waiting to find love in the space where they live, so they're prepared to go wherever in the world. I know so many people who've gone to Colombia, who've gone to Brazil, to Africa, to Jamaica to get married to people that they've met online. And some of these marriages are going well. As I say, there are red flags, and you have to do your own work. For me, the process was very long and very tedious. It was very deliberate. So after I got married, my husband and I were in a long distance relationship for 5 years. Yeah, I'm not a fool. So for me, I wasn't going to do the sponsorship thing until I felt comfortable that this is the right person for me to go through that process, because it's not very easy. So just imagine 5 years of being away from your husband, but I was going very often because my job allowed me to go in the summertime, to go for Christmas. Every holiday you can think of, I could just hop on a plane and go. And so, we had this long distance relationship, but I was traveling very often. 5 years before I felt comfortable saying, this is what we want. This is what is good for both of us. Now, Rain Drop 360. I'm not sure if you're already married or if you're just thinking of going through the process and you just want to know how it is. It is a very tedious process. It's very tiring. It's at times so frustrating. But at the end, when everything is over and done and you look back, you're thinking, wow, I can't believe we went through that. And it's just, especially if you have found that special person and you're come together after you've gone through all of that and you finally get to stay in the same place together. It is so wonderful. I just can't, say more about that. When I think about my own experience, I smile about it. My husband and I still talk about it, still reminisce about some of the things that we did and some of the experiences we had just going through that process. And it can do one of two things. It can bond you or it can tear you apart. Anyway, without going any further with this, first thing I have to say is I have some notes. And I have a bunch of paperwork that I've gone through. So as I do this series, I'm going to just tell you or give you examples of some of the things that I did to help to speed the process. Because even though it took 5 years for me to put through the sponsorship, when I did, it took 7 months for everything to be completed. And at the time, I knew of other individuals who were going through the process 18 months, 24 months. But mine, because of the time and the way I prepared my file and the way, because I did it myself, I didn't use a lawyer, the way I collected my evidence and so on and so forth. Once the package got to the immigration officer, they knew it was a legitimate marriage. We had a story, and I'm a storyteller, so I build my stories of our times together. So first thing first, before you even consider getting married to anybody, this is what you need to know as a person who's planning to sponsor somebody. So the first thing, there are requirements that you have to meet. One, You have to prove, and I'm speaking for Canada now. Another day I'll do for America, but because I have the Canadian experience, but I know other folks who've gone through the process and sponsored someone to the United States of America. But we're dealing with Canada today. So first of all, you've got to prove you're a Canadian citizen or you are a permanent resident. So if you're a permanent resident of Canada, you can sponsor a spouse from wherever, or if you're a Canadian citizen. Um, you have to permanently live in Canada and you have to also work here. So if you are a Canadian citizen and you live in Jamaica, for example, and met your partner there, got married, you could still sponsor the person, but there's a different application that you have to do. You're applying, I think, out of the country, and we'll discuss that another time. But pretty much you have to, and before you complete the process, you're going to have to prove to immigration that you are planning to come back here. And when you come back here, you have to show your job that you're going to have when you return. So you're sponsoring a spouse, and you can legally prove that this person is your spouse, and that means a marriage certificate. And we'll go into that another time. You also have to prove that you're not going through any bankruptcy or any default in your finances. So if you're having financial problems, if you have filed for bankruptcy, you cannot sponsor anybody. You're not going to be able to. That bankruptcy would have to be discharged before you can go through the process. So that would disqualify you. You are not incarcerated. So again, even if you got married in Jamaica and you started the process of sponsoring somebody, or I always use Jamaica as an example, but wherever you are, if you're married to the person, you started the process of sponsoring your spouse, and then you become incarcerated, you won't be able to sponsor your partner. You must prove you can adequately provide for your spouse. Now, let's say, for example, you're married to a lady or a man in Jamaica, and these individuals have children from their previous relationships. They're expected to put these kids on the application as well, because any child that is not on the application, that person is not going to be able to apply for that kid later on. So you as a sponsor must understand that when you sponsor this male or female and their kids to come to Canada, you are responsible for all of them. And so you must be able to show and prove that you're going to be able to provide for these, your spouse and kids and so on. Then you also have to show that you have never been convicted of any dangerous sex or any violent crimes. So whether you're in prison at the time of sponsorship or you're free but you've had this in your past, you won't be able to sponsor that person. And then if you have sponsored a husband or a wife in the past 3 years, you will not be able to sponsor a new partner. So let's say you were married and you sponsor someone else from whichever country, and then you and that person broke up, you can't sponsor anyone else for 3 years after that. So even if, like I said, if you're divorced, you still won't be able to sponsor anybody if the 3-year period have not passed. You're not allowed, or you will not be able to sponsor someone if you're on any kind of social assistance. So if you're on welfare, and this happens a lot to people in Jamaica who meet individuals who, and they get married to the person, but they fail to realize that these individuals live in wherever, North America or in Europe or whatever, and these individuals collect social assistance. That removes you from that opportunity to sponsor anyone. Now, if you have a disability, that's a different story. If you have a disability, you might be you are definitely still able to sponsor your spouse. So, in order to get the ball rolling, so you are already married, or you can prove that you're in a common law relationship with somebody outside of the country, there are some things that you're going to have to show. You have to prove. You have to prove your credentials. So, what is your career? What is your job? Whatever. You have to show a proof of marriage. And your partner will have to prove a lot of things too, or provide a lot of things as well. So they have to give their passport, their birth certificate, or any other document to prove their identity. Medical background screening will be done with the partner. So when you're preparing this package, all of this information has to be in it, because you're presenting this information to that immigration officer to prove that you have qualified for sponsoring someone, and the person you're sponsoring meets all the requirements as well. So their birth certificate or any other forms of identity, medical background screening, and they can't have any criminal record, no criminal background, because they will not be admitted. So for example, someone was living in the United States of America and they got deported for whatever reason. That person is inadmissible to Canada. So, if you're getting involved with people, you need to find this out, because again, it's a very common thing where people get married to folks who have been deported from the United States or from Canada, and they're trying to re-enter another country without declaring the fact that they were deported. These things are linked. These immigration borders are linked, and so this information is there. So if they deceive you, you get stuck married to someone and you have no interest in moving back to Jamaica or moving to wherever they are in the world, then you don't want to start it. Because as we speak, there's someone that I know that married someone who got deported to Jamaica. He didn't declare that he was deported from the United States. And so when she started going through the process of sponsoring him here, she found out he cannot come. Another story for another day. Now, if you marry or sponsor someone and you do not remain in that marriage for up to 2 years, the person who you've sponsored. So this is for, the people who want to come to Canada or North America or wherever they want to come from, Jamaica, for example. Please understand that the days of just trying to latch on to somebody and get married with the intention of dumping them as soon as you come, it's not going to work anymore, because the law have changed. I think this Kenyan woman got duped by an African man. She brought him here and he had a child back home, and as soon as he came here, she found out that he just used her to come. And so she rallied for laws to get changed. Good for her. I think she was walking around with this door on her back. She was making a very strong statement that, people from around the world are using citizens as an easy access to enter certain countries. And when they come, then they go. These fraudulent marriages cause a lot of pain, and a lot of people lose a lot of money because it costs a lot, time and effort and emotion and all these things to go through the process only to find out that you're duped. So now you cannot just come and just dump the person that you marry or the person who sponsor you. So take heart, individuals who are worried that people might want to use you. If they attempt to do that and they try to leave you, you can have them deported. Keep in mind, as I said before, that they can't be on welfare. So when you sponsor this individual, this is another thing to be very careful about, because once you sponsor someone, you have signed and agreed with Immigration Canada that you're responsible for these individuals, and that if anything happens within a 3-year period, they collect social assistance, you have to pay it back. You are on the lurch for that. So imagine a woman comes up with 3 kids and collects welfare, just leaves and collects welfare. And the thing is, that woman can claim abuse. She could claim domestic abuse. And if she's able to prove that she's abused by her spouse, she can then get welfare, and the husband will be on the lurch for that money. So your pledge is going to be for 3 years. You're responsible for these individuals for 3 years. And as I said earlier, if you marry somebody and the wedding and the marriage proves to be illegitimate, whether it's on your side or the side of the person who tried to deceive you, then the person sponsored will definitely be deported. But if it turns out that you are part of that scam, like if you agreed to marry someone knowing that it wasn't a real marriage, that the person was not interested in you and you were okay with that, you also will find yourself in a lot of trouble. But the new rules, in terms of having to stay together for 2 years, and if you divorce within that time or before that time, for the 2 year period, and you have no kids, these are the ones who are definitely on the chopping block to be deported. I mentioned earlier about the domestic abuse case. If the person can prove that they were being abused by the one who sponsored them, then they might not be deported. And they will, if they have to collect assistance, then you have to repay that. Now, the process, it varies from time to time. So when I was doing mine, there were people who were like going through the process of 24 months, even more, because the shorter the relationship. So if you've met someone within a 6 month period and you're married within that time, or a 1 year period, chances are your process will take longer than somebody who's been married for more years. Like by the time my process came around, I finished, people were in the system for a year before me, because we were already married all that time. We already had a baby, and so it was the child alone proved that the marriage was legitimate. But the process, the years, and of course documentation, phone records, and so on, and I'll get into that afterwards. So what to expect after submitting the application, the sponsorship application? I think it's called a Schedule A. Number one, you're expected to receive what is called an AOR. So it's an acknowledgement of receipt application. Once you've filled out your form, your application, listen, with this application, some people's application are £5, weighs £5, because of all the evidence that you're going to gather. You're going to letters that you've written to each other, of course, your wedding photographs as much as you can, trips to Jamaica, your plane tickets, your if you're in Jamaica and you use Digicel, you're keeping your receipts, your phone bill records. You're going to need to send those in to show those phone calls over the years. If you have bought gifts for each other, you have to show receipts of these gifts. Just every evidence to show that this is a real relationship, and sort of show them how it's built and how it's grown over the period of time. If you have just gotten in a relationship that you met, on vacation or whatever, you can still be seen as a legitimate marriage, but you're going to have to, for some reason, prove, have a harder burden of proof on you, I guess, and you will definitely be called for an interview. So persons with short-term, romance that leads to marriage will have more to prove than the ones who, of course, history over time, you have more evidence to prove that this is legitimate. So the one, you're getting the AOR, acknowledgement of receipt, once you've submitted your application to the Mississauga office, then you're going to get an online acknowledgement of that receipt. And that could take, I think it could take up to 3 months. I have to double check on that for you. Then number two, you're going to get a linking account. It's called GCKEY account. It's created, so permanent resident applications can be linked to this account. So you can have an online access to it to see what's happening. So for example, once you've submitted your application in Mississauga, it then gets sent to Kingston. Once it's approved here, so in this what is it called? GCKEY, you'll be able to see if your sponsorship is approved. And that itself, the wait is just so scary, because you want to make sure that when you fill in your form and you submit all your documents, if it's not done properly, it will be sent to you and you're going to be back at the end of the line. You have to start all over again. But once it's approved and you get it's called an SA, your sponsorship approval, then they tell you how long it takes to be transferred to Kingston and how long you have to wait to hear from Kingston. So PCC and Schedule A request in an online account. You'll find that information online. You're going to be asked for your medical requests for your partner will be in his online account. So you have to, once you set up this account, you have to check it regularly, because you could get a request there. And if you and you have a deadline to submit this by a particular time, if you don't submit it, then chances are again you're going to be thrown to the back of the line, or your application might just be dismissed if you're not doing what they're asking you. As soon as they're asking you for these things, you cannot have any delay. It must be ready right away. Then next step is an AOR2, which is acknowledgement of the receipt. So when you provide the request comes to you and you provide it, then in a short period of time, you will get a receipt. And this is from the Kingston Visa Office. As I was saying earlier, that once your application is sent, because once it's approved here, it's then sent to Kingston for processing. Those who are asked to come for an interview, so they'll either ask you for a passport request, or they'll ask you for an interview. And when you get an interview, it's because the immigration officer has questions. They're not convinced that this is a legitimate marriage, or they have doubts, or they might just need some clarification. And so oftentimes the spouse from here might be asked to fly down to Jamaica, and you both get interviewed separately to see if this is a real marriage, to see whatever. And believe me, in that stage, many people have been turned down because they don't know each other enough. It's not that they don't really love each other and it's not a real relationship, but the individuals sometimes get turned down because they really didn't know anything about each other. So when they get taken aside and asked these questions that you should be knowing about the person you're going to be spending the rest of your life with, and you don't know, then these applications are turned down. In that stage, it's just shut and done and over and not approved. But sometimes these individuals over time go back and apply again. I guess after you get shut down this time, and a year later you're still together and you have set up all the proof that you are in a real marriage, then of course there should be any problem. And especially if during the process of waiting to reapply you have a baby, of course. So the next step, again after that, you're going to get what is called a COPR, which is confirmation of permanent visa. So once you've gone through this process, and keep in mind too, when you're asked to submit the medical, it has to be correct. Like I think if you submit a medical that is the latest 2 months before it expires, but you might have to do another one before the process is complete, because when you get your permanent landed status, you must have a recent medical report. So the COPR, confirmation of permanent visa, is when you get that message in, I think it's called ECAS, it's electronic client application, and this is the online service that allows the citizenship and sponsors, Citizenship Canada, to allow sponsors to be able to go on and check their status of their application and the process and respond to what is needed of them. So pretty much what I'm saying to you is that when you're going through the process of sponsoring someone to Canada, the onus is on you to prove that this is a bona fide marriage. This is a legal term. It's a bona fide marriage. So you're going to need to show these things. You're going to put together the right evidence to show that the government, that you and your partner have entered a marriage for love and it's not fraudulent. And the documents that are also going to be included. Just think of everything that could possibly link you to this individual to show that this is a real marriage. One, do you own a home together? And if the person lives in another country, you might very well have a place together. So do you own a home together? If you don't, do you have any bank account together? Do you have any insurance together? Do you have children? And if you have children, you have to provide their birth certificates. You need affidavit. You might have to get individuals who've known you for a long time to write letters, but it has to be an affidavit. So it has to be a legal document to prove that these individuals know you and they're kind of character references, friends, and family. So do you have any assets? The more assets you have together, the more likely it will show that this is a real marriage. And then the pictures that I was talking about earlier, pictures of your wedding, take pictures, and pictures, they must tell a story. They must tell a story. and it's a story that must be told. A lot of people that get turned down, the history, no matter how much pictures you rush to take in 6 months, it's not going to convince someone that this is legitimate. So if you're thinking of getting married to somebody, it's best that you know that immigration is looking at how this relationship has blossomed from one stage to the next. And the pictures tell the story. So your trips to Jamaica, copies of your plane trip, as I said earlier, your phone records, and gifts that you might have bought for your partner, your receipts, those are important. Cards that you send to each other, and if you have if you speak on online messenger, whatever, you need to save those messages and photocopy those because they want to see them. And then you're going to be asked to declare your partner's world income. So even if your husband is in Jamaica and he doesn't have a job, well, you can't just tell Canadian immigration that, oh, the person doesn't have a job, and you have to sign paper to say this person doesn't have an income, or you have to declare the person's income. And if you don't do, you're going to be affected by it. Now, this person that you're marrying in Jamaica, if the person owns property and whatever, it's going to affect your income tax in this country, because once you get married, they're going to pull all your resources together. Something to think about, and I'll talk about in another video as well. So there is this new process online that gives you access for the submission of the documents. I touched on that briefly earlier. The police clearance, the Schedule A, and these medical forms. They're supposed to allow the process to be faster. So now they're looking at a 12-month period that it could take that time. Yeah, say up to 12 months for at least 80% of the applications. So that's what you're looking at, and that's pretty good. When I did mine, the year previous to that, people were taking 18 to 24 months. And that was really difficult for a lot of people. I'm going to end this video here now. I hope it has been useful. I'm going to make more going forward, explaining in detail the different things that you have to do, and to help you, go through the process. Because like I said, it's very stressful, and it can be overwhelming to someone who is trying to do it on their own. If you can afford to use a lawyer, then you go ahead and do that, but you can do it yourself, but you have to be patient, and both of you have to be on the same page. And if you're going to be someone who's going to just pressure you all the time and say it's taking too long, and people have had lots of big fights and big arguments over this kind of thing, because when they don't hear from immigration, it takes time, and sometimes even if you send inquiry to ask what's going on with your file and whatever, they don't always get back to you because you're busy. People are migrating, millions of people are migrating per year. So, you're not just a priority. Stay blessed, everyone.